Software engineers have been slowly discovering something uncomfortable about AI. It doesn't replace you, but it takes parts of the job that you actually enjoy and leaves you with reviewing AI's work all day. And if you're an aspiring data analyst, the same shift is coming your way. And for those who are in the industry like myself. But there's a twist that no one's talking about in this space just yet. So, first, I'm going to break down the pattern that software engineers are seeing right now that is about to hit analytics hard. Then, I'm going to show you why AI being 95% right is actually more dangerous than being wrong. And I'm going to show you one small miss in my career that taught me a lesson that I'll never forget. And last, we're going to have a counter argument that flips this whole crisis into the biggest career opportunity in healthcare analytics in the last decade. My name is Jeff. I started out as a temp data entry worker over 15 years ago. I eventually worked my way up to become a data analyst, and now I'm a business analyst consultant at a top Fortune 500 healthcare company. I use AI every day at work. I build automations, AI agents, backend systems, and I'm on a mission to help 10,000 people break into data analytics. So subscribe if you want to become one of them. Now, here is what happened. A blog post just hit the front page of Hacker News. And for those who don't know or are not familiar with Hacker News, it's basically where software engineers and tech people go to debate the real stuff, not the polished LinkedIn takes, but it's like raw, unfiltered versions. And here is what this post was covering. It was called Some of the Uncomfortable Truth About AI Coding Agents. And the debate got heated. Hundreds of engineers weighing in, and the things that they're describing, I'm already watching happen to analysts. So let's break this down. The big one right now is skill atrophy. The argument goes like this. AI coding agents are writing more and more of the code, and the engineer's job is shifting from writing code to reviewing what AI wrote, basically becoming a manager or a director of AI workers instead of doing the work yourself. And this is something that I've been talking about for a while, is that we are going to be moving from the actual execution to more of a director role managing these AI teams and AI agents. But more people are starting to realize this shift as it affects their daily work. And a lot of people don't like becoming a manager or a director. One engineer made the comparison that struck with me. They said it's like self-driving cars. The system is good enough 95% of the time, but you stop paying attention and you get comfortable. And when that 5% happens, you weren't watching. And that's where the risk happens. Another person also said that companies, and I've seen this in my own personal life and talking with friends, are requiring all developers and people in general to use AI tools, and they're monitoring the usage. And other companies are starting to lay the ones who won't do that. And this is not a hypothetical future scenario. You're starting to see the headlines and news stories. This is happening right now. And the part that hits the hardest is multiple engineers said that AI takes the fun parts of the job and leaves you with the unfun parts. The machine does the creative building, you do the quality checking. You're expected to be excited about it at the same time. Now, let's translate how this relates to data analytics, because it's similar but a little different, because the same pattern is already showing up. What AI can do for analysts right now, it can write your SQL, it can build your dashboards, it can create Excel models, it can clean your data, generate reports, it can spot patterns across massive data sets faster than you ever could. Now, what's left? We validate, we interpret, we communicate, we decide, and we have to catch the errors before it's someone else's problems. Now, validation becomes a stronger need. Now your daily work starts to look like this. Now you're checking the AI query, double checking that did it double count members, did it actually interpret the data correctly? You're verifying dashboard logic that accounts for edge cases inside the data. You're figuring out whether the trend that AI surfaced is a real pattern, or maybe it interpreted it in the wrong way because it didn't have the full context. Or it could just be two things happening at the same time that AI didn't attribute it to correctly. Now that is where the job is moving towards. Not building the dashboard, making sure the dashboard is right, and then also doing the polishing. And then on top of that, taking accountability when the AI is wrong. Now, what I can tell you from personal experience of how I've been personally affected, and this is something that happened to me recently. I've been tracking my own productivity data in detail because of AI. I wanted to track everything that I'm doing for everything for YouTube, the business, my day job, upskilling, learning, everything. So what I did was I counted it for every hour. I've been using Toggle, highly recommend it. I fed all of it into AI and I asked it to find patterns and trend so I could optimize my schedule and figure out what is the most optimal use for my time, how much does my sleep affect my productivity, all of that. And AI analyzed the data correctly within the parameters and the context that it had. Math was right, trends were accurate, but the conclusions were wrong. It flagged several of my lower output days as low energy days and started building this whole narrative around my sleep patterns and my recovery needs. It recommended that I had to reduce my workload and restructure my schedule based on these supposed energy dips. But it didn't make sense to me. Those weren't low energy days. Yes, some of them I slept at 5 a.m. and that was my fault. I was gaming or I was working on a project and got sidetracked and had to wake up at 8:30. It happens. One day, and then but some of those were a day where I actually planned to hang out with some of my best friends. Another day was when family needed help with something that came unexpected. Another day I intentionally took off because ironically, AI told me that I'd been overworking and I needed a full day rest. The data was right, but the context was missing. AI built confident recommendations on top of a story it invented based on the data that it saw. But I almost implemented this productivity rules and like a new system based on those recommendations and limits on my own output based on trends that didn't exist in the way that AI described them. So what I did was because it felt like it wasn't making sense, what I did was I went line by line, section by section through the analysis and checking AI's reasoning to find where AI was making the classic mistake, treating correlation like causation. And if you're familiar with this concept, it's basically just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean that one causes the other. And the one that comes into my mind always is like a sleep study where it was a college study where they said that people who had their shoes on when they slept had worse sleep. And so they thought that sleeping with their shoes caused bad sleep. They didn't account for the fact that they were college students and they were partying. And when you get drunk and you pass out, you sleep with your shoes sometimes. And that could attribute to the bad sleep. Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one causes the other. And that's what happened here. I only caught it because I knew my own patterns well enough to push back because it wanted me to dial back my productivity and how much I was working, but I didn't personally feel burnt out. And if I just accepted that output, I would have limited my own productivity based on a fiction that looked like data and a narrative that AI was creating. Now, another example that happened was when I used AI to redo my wife's resume. And this is something that I'm deeply familiar with because I became the resume guy. People would send me their resumes, but I would get random people asking for me to do their resume because one of my friends suggested that I'm always good at it. What I found was the output was decent, it's technically fine. But reading it, it just felt bland. It didn't position my wife's experience as a benefit to the hiring manager. It read like a list of things she's done, like this is what I do, this is I do this, I could do this. But didn't feel like a case where you want to bring her in because she's going to be a benefit for your team. It's more like this is why I'm great, but not framed in the way to for the audience that it was serving. So what I did was I pulled from my digital marketing experience, my copywriting background. I told AI to treat the resume more like a sales letter. My wife's experience is the product. The hiring manager is the buyer. Sell them on bringing her in for the interview because that's what this is supposed to do. The resume is supposed to sell the interview and the curiosity. Quantify the impact. Don't make it about my wife. Make it about her experience and what it does for the department. And the result was a night and day difference. But that upgrade didn't come from a better prompt template. It came from my years of studying direct response copywriting, rewriting a bunch of people's resumes, getting people actual results into interviews, and understanding the other side of being on the hiring side and then reviewing people's resumes and being part of the hiring panel and understanding that the audience in this case was an empathetic hiring manager who needs to see themselves benefiting from this person, in this case my wife. And AI doesn't know that right away. It's just going to do the bland thing right off the cuff because that's what it's been trained on. That's you need to narrow down the scope. So that's why it's going to be this taste mechanism, and filtering based on your knowledge now is going to be a higher premium. Now, all of that said, it starts to get a little bit more uncomfortable because the problem isn't AI is obviously wrong. Because if it was, you'd be able to catch that. But the problem here is when AI is right 95% of the time based on the masses, because your brain just adjusts to it. You start trusting that output. You stop scrutinizing every line. That 5% slips through. It just looks just as polished and as confident as the 95% that looked and appeared correct. And this is something that we've been starting to see with industry benchmarks that found that developers using AI feel like they're 20% faster, but when you actually measure their output, they're 19% slower. That's a 39 point gap between how productive you think you are and how productive you really are with AI. So think about that. You feel like you're flying, the numbers say that you're not, and nobody catches that because the output looks clean. And now in software engineering, that 5% means that buggy code passes review, breaks in production 30 to 90 days later. That's bad. In healthcare analytics, that 5% could be a different animal. That could be a wrong quality measure that has high compliance, that affects your organization's quality scores, that leads to millions of dollars lost in bonus revenue. A miscounted risk adjustment cohort shifts your revenue projections, and now a claim, if it's a claims denial analysis, then it'll send leadership and people down the wrong path. So the stakes aren't theoretical here; they are just going to be adjusted, and we start to have to know where we fit within the AI ecosystem and how things evolve. And I know this because I've lived this. Not before AI was even a part of the conversation. Early in my career, there was a fire drill. For people who know fire drills, it's where everyone's hair is on fire. There's things that are broken. It needs to get fixed immediately, or it's going to hemorrhage more money, affect more members, and we have to get this fixed right away before it gets escalated even more. And what happened was there was something that affecting a member. The error was traced back to our department and specifically to a process that I touch. My process is part the ones that I built. So what I did was I checked every sub process. I checked the SQL. I checked the queries. I checked every logic layer, the validation, checking, rechecking, and trying to find out what broke and why did it get through. And my manager came over to my desk because it looked like I was freaking out. And I was internally because this was millions of dollars. And I was thinking that I could have cost the company. It was my fault directly. And that's not an exaggeration. That was one of the times where I thought I was going to get fired from my job for costing the company millions of dollars. And in healthcare data, it was just a small number in group, like literally like a handful, but it was affecting a high utilization in a very rare edge case that costs a lot of money and would cascade into further compliance issues from there, and member impact and financial exposure if this kept going. That was career ending anxiety for hours. Luckily, it turned out this was an upstream data issue and wasn't my fault, luckily. But that experience taught me something that I carry to this day. Healthcare data does not forgive small mistakes, and you need to check your validations. You need to make sure that you can trust your own systems in case something does happen. you can always pull back and you have redundancy checks on top of that. So I learned that lesson when I was the one writing the automation, when I knew every line of logic because I built it myself. Now imagine that AI is generating those outputs at scale. A lot of us don't know how these neural networks work. They're just a black box to us. We just get the AI output, and the person reviewing doesn't have 13 years of scar tissue telling them that to check every layer because we can't. That's going to be 5% of the problem. So we have to build in the validations to check AI's work when we're inside healthcare analytics. And in healthcare, that 5% could be $1 million mistake in disguise. Or if you're working with clinical data, you could potentially affect member lives as well if you don't account for it. So the stakes are extremely high. And here's the truth that nobody in data analytics in the healthcare space is saying clearly enough. The analysts who survive this shift aren't going to be the best ones at SQL. That's becoming not essential. Yes, you need to know the foundations enough, but AI is creating SQL so good that you don't have to worry about the execution. You just need to know enough to know that you can check it, or you have a way to check it, and then you can validate and direct AI in the right direction. The people who are going to succeed are going to be the ones that are best at knowing when AI's answer is wrong. And that's the judgment. You can't learn that from a certification currently because the market keeps evolving that courses can't keep up. You can't shortcut it with a better prompt. You can get a better output, but you have to build it by working inside the domain long enough to know what wrong looks like before you can even prove it. And that gut feeling that something is off, that comes from experience, and that's a thing that AI can't replicate. You have to be able to understand and get that experience in how you need to be able to succeed in the current market. Because it's easy enough to create a impressive portfolio project, especially with AI nowadays. But when you're working on the job, it's going to be significantly harder to make sure that you build in the tools that also check AI's output, but also help you build in the tools to validate everything. And you have a system that works that you can trust. Now, before this turns into a doom video, let me give you the other side because there's one comment in the Hacker News thread that reframed this whole thing for me as well. One person worked at a 50-year-old company and they said that AI is making it possible to fix 20 years of accumulated technical debt. Accumulated technical debt is basically things that you leave off that you know because of business knowledge. Say like there's a validation that's off because it always flags this edge case as true, but it's not true, and you just account for it by manually doing it. Or you're saving something for later when you go on PTO. Or there's other things that you put off to later because you don't want to technically deal with it now. That's a like simple summary of like what technical debt is. And with all of this, with AI, legacy code that nobody wants to touch, systems that are held together with legacy systems and duct tape, AI now can help clean all of that up. I've been using it to help with all the boring parts, like documentate, like commenting in detail and creating technical specs and documentation for code bases and tools that I just, that's not the fun part of building. You just don't want to do that. But you have to do it so that your people who are going to cover you on PTO or just even when something breaks and they need to look at it, it's easier for them to go through the whole tool because now they have the actual technical specs that will guide them through trying to figure it out. And when I read that, I was completely thinking that is healthcare. Healthcare is built on legacy software. It's slow. There's a lot of parts that are still built in like Microsoft Access. And there's not a knock against Microsoft Access because it can do something. It's very powerful, and I still build in it today, but it's still legacy. And if 60% of hospitals are still running critical applications on legacy software like Access, the average hospital runs somewhere between 200 to 300 different software systems, and many don't talk to each other. This is decades of messy data siloed reporting, duct tapes, workflows that everyone complains about that nobody has the bandwidth to fix. Now AI can help fix that. But it's only if someone knows and understands the healthcare domain enough to be able to drive it. Someone who knows what clean actually looks like in this context. Someone who could tell that AI matter, what AI's output is and where it matters and where it doesn't. That someone could be you. And that's not the crisis, that's the opportunity. Because a lot of people are not taking the time to learn AI. I'm in the trenches and I've talked to so many people and I've my personal friends, I've seen coworkers, they're just not digging into AI as deeply as I am. And the opportunity to compound your growth and use AI to get you ahead and become more technical than people who are already in this space is massive. There is a massive opportunity to take right now and to use AI to get you ahead and get you into the companies and get you the experience and propel you forward. So I'm not saying this from the sidelines. I right now, one of the things that I'm learning is Databricks. I never had to use Databricks before, and I'm learning it, and AI's helped me significantly just catch up to where a lot of people where I can take on a new project if I need to. I'm learning AI engineering. I'm learning network and cybersecurity. I'm studying web application architecture. I'm building multi-agentic systems, figuring out how to control costs for token costs with all of these LLM providers and fix memory issues in autonomous tools. And that's not because someone told me, that's because I can see where this is heading. And the analyst who treats AI like a collaboration partner and like a tool where the market is going to evolve whether you like it or not. So you might as well evolve because when we switch from horse and buggy to cars and the steam engine, I bet you there are still a lot of people complain that they wish they could just ride a horse and that cars are too loud, they make too much pollution, they're too noisy. But the people who did not adapt and move to the steam engine and to cars were left behind. So we have to adapt. And the opportunity is here for those to do it earlier than others. Because treat AI like an genius intern who makes mistakes. Inexperienced coworker who needs supervision and direction. Those are the ones, and you're the one who knows how to work with them to get the best output and potential. Those are the ones who are going to be indispensable. So here is the twist in the data analyst space that no one is talking about is those software engineers on Hacker News, they're mourning because for a lot of them, writing the code was the craft and what they loved. That's where their joy lived. And now AI is taking that from them. But for me, the fun was never in the code. It was always in the building. The designing, seeing things that actually work, figuring out the architecture, solving the puzzle pieces and watching it come together, watching the updates go live and perform the way that I imagine and help users. AI didn't take the fun parts away from me. It just gave me more of them in a different way. Now I build faster in more languages than I could have ever learned on my own. I tackle projects that I would never attempted before. I built in a full agent framework with a complete security threat model in 6 days with no prior security experience. That was not possible 2 years ago. And code was never the point. It's AI is just another tool. The building was always the point. And if you understand this and you understand how to work with AI and direct it in the right places, it doesn't have to feel like a crisis. It can feel like an upgrade. You just have to find joy in the new and how it evolves because there's going to be massive opportunities in a lot of different areas that AI is going to open up. You just have to find what part of that you get to live in and you can take advantage of so you can find that joy again. Your job as an aspiring analyst and when those of you who are trying to break in is not to write perfect SQL. It was to know when the SQL is wrong and to ask a question that nobody else thought to ask and translate the answers to what the data means into a decision the business can act on. AI makes the job more valuable, not less. Not only if you build the judgment to back it up, but if you build the judgment alongside the other people who are serious about breaking into healthcare analytics, that is the opportunity. And on that note, I am building the Healthcare Analyst Lab. It's a community where we're developing exactly these skills. How to break into healthcare analytics and also how to evolve and stay up to date with AI. So domain knowledge, validation mindset, career strategy that AI can't replace. in a community of like-minded people. So link application is in the description below. Check it out if you want and if that interests you. And if you got value out of this, subscribe because every week I'm going to share what's exactly happening in the industry and with AI so that you can get better and break in and evolve. So watch this next video because YouTube thinks you're going to like it. And I'll see you in the next one. Query responsibly and bye.